Welcome to Long Walker Outdoors, your destination for all things hunting, shooting, and the boundless wonders of the great outdoors. At Long Walker Outdoors, we live and breathe the thrill of the hunt, the crackle of a campfire, and the camaraderie that comes with sharing stories of our outdoor adventures. Whether you're a seasoned hunter with decades of experience or a newcomer eager to learn the ropes, this is the place for you. Join us on our podcast and YouTube channel as we delve deep into the world of hunting and shooting, from tips and tactics for bagging that trophy buck or nailing the perfect shot, to gear reviews, destination spotlights, and interviews with experts in the field. We've got you covered. So whether you're a bow hunter stalking game through the whispering pines, a rifle enthusiast testing your marksmanship against distant targets, or someone who finds solace in the serenity of nature, Long Walker Outdoors is your home away from home. Join us as we embark on this wild and wonderful journey, exploring the untamed beauty of the great outdoors and celebrating the traditions and passions that unite us as hunters, shooters, and lovers of all things wild. So let's lock and load, hit the trail, and make memories that will last a lifetime. Welcome to Long Walker Outdoors, where every hunt is an adventure and every shot tells a story. Well, hey, good afternoon, everybody. This is Chace. I'll be your host today on Long Walker Outdoors. And today I'm going to be hanging out with Kail Larsen, and we're going to be talking elk today. It should be a pretty fun podcast. Kail's a cousin and a great friend of mine. He just got back from Arizona, doing some work down there for a while, and back up here in North Dakota. And guy's a certified bona fide wildlife biologist. So should probably know a little bit about what you're talking about. Hey, Kale.
Yeah, you could say that, Chace. I've been a wildlife biologist for several years now. Like you said, I just got back from Arizona. I was managing a district of the Forest Service down there for wildlife. Had a good time down there doing that, but it's good to be home. Back up here in the North Country where I'm familiar with. And since you're talking about elk, I might as well, say that I've hunted elk for the last, off and on for the last 10 years now, I think. Either for myself or for some friends of mine. I've hunted elk in Arizona, Wyoming, and North Dakota and South Dakota. So I've been around. I've seen a few, types of elk hunting. So I am not going to say I'm an expert on the subject, but I have done it, more than some. So,
well, more than me.
What do we want to?
More than me for sure. I know you've gotten at least one or two more elk than I have. I know you got one this last fall. For winter, rather, down there, and while you're down there in Arizona, you drew a cow tag on what was that, a depredation unit that you got down there?
Yep. So down in Arizona, they've got some depredation units, or they call them non-hunt units, non-permit hunt units, and those areas are designed to reduce the elk populations in the units due to conflicts with landowners, agriculture, or they're just places that elk have moved into that the Game and Fish doesn't want the elk there. So they use the over-the-counter tags as a way to kind of help manage those herds and reduce numbers where they can. And I was, fortunate enough. I lived near one of them and was able to get out and ended up being successful. So, yeah.
Yeah, you were. Hey, and for those of you who don't know, like this guy, he lives everybody's dream, or at least everybody who hunts, he lives their dream, right? This guy's get paid to just go out and find animals, figure out where they live. So he cheats, right? He goes out and he's able to do a lot of his scouting as part of his job. So I am crazy jealous of you being able to do that. But that's a big reason why I wanted you on the show today. To talk about elk, because Yeah, maybe you've been hunting them for a large number of years. You've gotten a few, but you go out there and you almost live with these animals on a daily basis. So I think you've got a lot of great information to give to everybody here.
Sure, yeah, no, that's for sure. I now don't be giving my secrets away, would you?
Oh,
But
I'm
yeah,
not gonna tell where you go.
I do spend quite a bit of time, not necessarily managing elk per se, but in areas where they're abundant. And so I do get familiar with the elk while, doing work with other animals. And so, yeah, that ends up when I do draw those tags, it helps me, kind of know the area, know where to look for elk, how to find them, stuff like that, the stuff that it does take to be successful on an elk hunt.
Yeah, like I said, super, super jealous. Well, so let's kind of start out with the basics. So let's look at this like, let's say I drew a Wyoming tag. Okay. And it doesn't have to
Okay.
be specific to Wyoming, but that's just kind of the scenario. I drew a tag in a new area, haven't been to it before, and I'm wanting to, start my research early. And of course, the first thing a lot of people do, the first thing I do is I go to e-scouting. I use my Onyx or I use my Avenza or I use Google Earth or whatever. And I'm going to take a look at that country and the unit that I'm going on, and I'm going to start breaking that down. So for
Sure.
you, with your experience, how would you start breaking down that country?
So when I start looking at a place that I want to hunt elk, the first thing I like to do, and so I use Onyx maps, so I'm gonna reference that a lot. Onyx has a lot of wildlife layers, so you can activate those layers, and it'll kind of tell you the range of whatever animal you're hunting. In this case, elk. And so if I'm hunting a U unit, I'll turn that layer on to kind of give me an idea of where the historic range of the elk are for that unit. And then after that, I'll break it down even farther from there. I'll start looking at, access points. Where can I get to? Where are other people going to be getting to? Are there some roadless areas that I can hunt? Um, you know, Pockets of cover, because these elk need thermal cover. They need, forage, stuff like that. And then I also, big deal I look for is glassing points, out west, like where we hunt, glassing, you've got to glass. Like if it's hard to be successful out west without using your glass. It helps keep the miles off your boots. So that's one big thing I look for in when I'm doing my e-scouting.
So you mentioned the historical range function on Onyx. I've looked at that and I've kind of questioned, to myself, how accurate, that would be. Have you found that actually to be a pretty accurate function on there for the most part?
For the most for the most part, yeah. It seems to be fairly accurate. And I don't, it's definitely not the end all be all of where elk are gonna be. They may be there, it may be historic summer range of elk, it may be historic winter range of elk. Doesn't mean there's elk there at the time you're hunting, but it gives you a good reference point on where to start looking. You know,
Okay.
what parts of the unit have been known to have elk in them? What parts of the unit, even the Game and Fish doesn't think there's elk there. Just gives you a good starting point.
Gotcha. Yep, and that's what we're looking for right there is starting points. So
Yep.
what are you looking for as far as like water sources when you see that when you look on that map?
Okay, so water sources, that's another one. That's a very good thing to look for. Elk are, they're big animals. They have to drink water every day. And so looking and finding the water sources in a unit is vital. Now elk can travel, long distances in a day. 15 miles for an elk is just a walk in the park. So, but if you can find some permanent water, stock tanks are great ones to look for. Streams, lakes, stuff like that. Any kind of permanent water is always another good place to start to look for elk sign.
Yeah. Yep. And that kind of corresponds. They're going to not be able to really create those wallows without some sort of water source, huh?
Yup. Yup. Exactly.
Okay. Gotcha. So when you're looking at Onyx, we'll stick with Onyx for now because I think the majority of people probably listening to this podcast is probably using Onyx or some variant of. I know
Yup.
Onyx can look at, you can start pulling different layers on like different feed sources, different cover sources and things like that. Hey, so what are your opinions on that? What should we be looking for as far as feed and cover within those layers?
Okay. Well, as far as my experience with the Onyx goes with like their feed, their covers and stuff, it's not completely uh updated. Like they don't have data for everywhere. And so that one's kind of hit and miss. But when I'm looking at a map for, you know, feed, one big deal is ag fields. If you've got ag fields in your unit and that are near, if you're hunting public land, if you got ag fields near public land, those are great places to target in at because those ag fields are, high in nutrients, high in protein. Those elk are going to gravitate towards those ag fields when they can. Other things to look for are like oak stands. A lot of places that elk live have oak stands, and they are also a very high protein food that the elk like to frequent when you're having, a good mast year and there's a lot of acorns on the ground. The elk will frequent those quite a bit. Other places to look for are, and Onyx has a layer for this, are burns. Old burn scars, because once a fire goes through, you get a lot of grass and new growth coming up in those burns, which are also highly desired by the elk, and that'll draw them in too. Um, and those, like I said, Onyx has a layer of recent burns, stuff like that, that you can go look at and see. And most of them have the year on them of, what year those burns occurred. So you can see, this burn's 3 years old. So the new growth in that isn't going to be as good as this burn that was last year. Um, and then meadows are another good one to look for because they usually have your grasses and forbs and stuff, which are also, you know, elk will prefer those over browse when they can get it.
Gotcha. So then how does that going to change then when you look at different times of the year? So like, for an example, here in South Dakota, we've got your early season, you've got your archery, which starts earlier. Then you move into your rifle season, which is that, October, November timeframe. And then you roll into your late cow season, which can go all the way into December. So how does those things we just talked about kind of change with those seasons there?
So the feed, just they're gonna change with the season. Whether you've got ag fields that are being harvested, or the acorns they're falling in, September, October. The elk's diet will change from high production, high protein forage to maybe lower grade stuff as the year progresses. Towards the winter, they elk start browsing on trees and stuff a lot more. As long as there's not heavy snow, they'll still paw through the snow and get at the grass when they can. And so that's, if you can find an alfalfa field or an old wheat field that's got some volunteer wheat coming up, those are good places to look. And open meadows, down kind of lower elevation where you're not at quite the, you don't have the snow level that you might have up in higher elevation where the milk can still get to the grasses and stuff.
Sure. Awesome. Yep. And check my notes here, make sure we're staying on track. Cool. So figured all that, and that's really good information. So say we moved kind of into that next process here that we're gonna start looking at getting some boots on the ground. We got a couple of days, maybe a week to get out there ahead of the season. And let's stick with kind of that mid-season, that October timeframe, at least here for South Dakota. Kind of they're going to be in the rut, should be bugling, should be herded up. And let's kind of start. Where are we going to start as far as boot scouting? Or would you start earlier than that?
If I've got the opportunity, I'm gonna start as early as I can. So if I've got a rifle tag that's, gonna start opening up in October, I'm gonna get in there in September. Because that's, during the rut, the bulls are bugling. They're moving a lot, so you can locate the elk a lot easier at that time of the year. Um, so when I'm going in to scout with boots on the ground, the first thing I'm checking is my access points. I want to see, the roads that I found on, my e-scouting, are they actually there? Or, can you drive them? Can you actually use them to get to your access points? The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go check the water sources, because if the water sources don't have elk tracks around them, there probably aren't any elk around. Um, and so that way, you can double check just to make sure there's elk in there somewhere by checking them water sources. I'm probably also gonna go check, if I can find some roadless areas. I'm gonna go in there and check to see, are they actually roadless? Do they have an unmarked trail that runs through them, or is it, heavily hunted? Is there gonna be other boot tracks in there from other hunters? And if there are, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just it kind of gives you a place to check where the pressure is gonna be.
Gotcha. So
And then
you're
I'm
no, go
also
ahead.
probably going to check my glassing points too, to make sure that I can actually use them to cover that country a little better. They're not all overgrown to where you can't see and use them as a glassing point.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. So you're really keying in on some of those roadless areas, though, from what I understand.
Yes and no. It depends. It depends on the area you're hunting. If you're hunting an area that doesn't have a lot of roadless areas, sometimes those can be the hardest pressured areas. The chunks of land that are roadless, because that's what everybody else is looking for. They're looking to get away from the roads, and then everybody keys in on this roadless areas, which, like I said, can increase the pressure there.
Gotcha. Cool. Good information, man. Good information. Anything else?
No, that's so far that's about all I got.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Hey, so we kind of covered some of this already, but when you get out into the field, um, I liked how you were talking about, looking for tracks around the water sources and stuff. And, everyone kind of knows look for scat, look for rubs and anything. But is there kind of any off the wall things like browse points or looking for things on, different, trees and stuff like that that you're kind of looking at to determine if elk are there beyond kind of what we covered?
Well, no, well, yes and no. Tracks, scat, rubs, those are the big ones. Like, if you aren't finding those, there's probably not a lot of elk around. Um, if you're in an area that, doesn't have any cattle in it, or any livestock, I should say, if you can find a heavily used trail, that's also a good sign to find. It means those elk or deer, whatever animals are traveling through there. And usually the elk trails look very similar to a cow trail. And about the only way you can know it's an elk trail and not a cow trail is knowing that there's not cows there. Um, Other things I like to look for when I can are wallows, um, whether they're fresh or even old ones. It gives you an idea of where them elk or where them bulls like to come during the middle of the day to cool off. Um, I look for beds, and a lot of times I find beds kind of at your transition zones or right on the edge of a ridge just before it drops off down, towards the bottom of the canyon. So I like to look for the beds. Another great thing to do is do some shed hunting. If you can get out about, this time of year, April, um, it's if you can do some shed hunting, that can give you a lot of information on the elk in the area, where they like to travel, where they're browsing, where they spend a lot of time, because a lot of the times they drop their sheds, in their beds, where they feed, on the trails occasionally, but they're mostly dropped on areas the elk use a lot. And so when you can find those sheds, that the elk are in those areas quite frequently.
Yeah. So have you noticed any habits that elk have as far as which north facing or south facing slopes, where they like to bed the most? Um, and does it change during, from the fall to the winter to the summer and or spring, when they're starting to drop these sheds? Do you see them kind of change which slopes that they're hanging out on more?
Oh, absolutely. Um, most of the time where I find the elk bedding down and hanging out is, like I said, right on the crest of a ridge, right where it goes from the top and starts dropping down in the bottom. And, you know, it depends on which side they're on for the time of the year and the weather. On during the summer, early fall when it's hot out, they're gonna be on the shady sides. They're gonna be in the timber in the shade where they can keep cool. Uh, Late fall, early winter, late winter in the when it's cold out, they're gonna be laying on the sunny sides of the ridge. The south facing sides, the east facing sides, the southeast facing sides in the mornings, and the southwest facing sides in the evenings. You know, just to help regulate their body heat, and so they can stay warm or cool, just depending on the weather. You know, and then the wind can also play a factor in where they like to bed down during the day. Uh, if it's not real windy, just a light breeze up, I don't know, 10, 15 miles an hour, they'll be closer to the top of those ridges. But if you got a wind that's just howling through the trees, a lot of the times they'll eke off down the side a little farther just to kind of get out of that wind.
I got you. So that kind of leads us into the next question here. We do a lot of mountain lion hunting and around here, and that starts up right after December. And so we're out hiking around, wandered around a lot in the wintertime. And of course, we see uh get tracks, scat, and that. But how impactful is that as far as looking at your winter range? I guess maybe I should step back. So is there some indicators on where elk will prefer to winter, and kind of what those needs are? And then a sub question to that is, does finding those areas in the wintertime, is that going to improve your odds in the fall?
Well, so you know they're finding where they're at in the winter. It can help in the fall. Um, depending on what part of the country you're in. They're, in the hills, they don't move a lot between their winter range and their summer and fall range. Because you don't have the elevation change that you might have out in Wyoming. Um, so they're not going to be traveling down the mountain, 20, 30 miles in the winter just to get out of the snow, you know. But um but it still can, they definitely are going to be up higher and in the thicker cover in the fall. Um when it's still somewhat warm out and you don't have any snow cover. Uh but yeah, I mean, it definitely can help in the fall because then it gives you an idea of, where that there's elk in the area. They may not be right there, but they shouldn't be too far away.
Yeah, so if I'm hearing you right, it just really, at the end of the day, it just kind of really depends on geography and where you are.
You know,
So you're probably, it's going to be more dependent on, if you're up in Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, somewhere through the Colorado, somewhere with a
you
lot of
know,
elevation change, and it might not be as important, here in the hills, down in
you know,
Nebraska. Maybe
up
so
up
down in
here and
Arizona. What about Arizona,
yep.
where you guys were at? Is it a big deal down there? I know you guys have some
Um,
elevation there, but it stays a lot more. I would say it stays probably more mild throughout the year, if
yeah,
I'm not
yep.
wrong.
So where I was up on top of the Mogollon Rim, and the elk would move off the rim for the fall, but it's usually we would get, you know, up up 6, 8 feet of snow up on the rim. But after you come off the rim, not even, I don't know, 10 miles, you got to where it was bare ground, no snow. So them elk, they would move off just off the rim, but not terribly far. But it also depends on the winter you're having. If you're having a mild winter, they usually stay up a little higher. Um, they stay closer to their fall range as long as the their forage is there, the food, the water, stuff like that. They'll stay fairly close. Um, Otherwise, if we get a good snow or a good cold snap, they'll definitely move down to where it's to some lower elevation to get out of the snow and the cold a little bit. Yeah, for sure.
Gotcha. Yeah, I love that Mogollon rim. That's just the coolest. It reminds me of
Oh,
all the Louis L'Amour books I read when I was growing up.
oh,
A lot of it's
oh yeah,
centered down there.
it was cool growing up reading those and then, being able to go to those places you hear about and, say I was there.
Yeah, that would be pretty wild. Hey, so stepping back a minute, I know we're jumping around quite a bit, and I I apologize to anyone listening to
Oh,
this. We're just kind of taking it as it goes. But, talking about the rut. Um, so are there specific places, types of covers, south slopes, terrain features, et cetera, that kind of draws elk in during the rut, places like where they like to set up rubs, places where they like to set up wallows, things like that. And yeah, how do you kind of identify those places, if you're looking at a map or you got boots on the ground?
well, that's one area that I haven't had a lot of experience in. I have only hunted elk in the rut. I, um, but the few things that I have noticed is, your rubs tend to be either in the bottom of the draws along your travel routes, or they're up higher up on the tops. Um, you know, Easier access where, if a bull's bugling, it can carry a ways. Um, other things that I've noticed is little pockets of timber. So if you've got so like there in the hills, if you've got pretty consistent uh stands of timber, there's not a lot of variation in them. they're not super dense. A lot of the times you'll find a lot more rut activity where it gets just a little bit thicker. Um, maybe you've got an oak stand mixed in with some pines. I've seen that draw quite a bit of activity. In the mornings you'll have the bulls and the cows down feeding in the meadows, and they'll work up into the shady slopes, your north facing slopes or your west facing slopes to get out of that heat. And so if you can find, they also need some some thermal cover and some just some regular visual cover. And so they like to bed down in some thickets better versus, you're just open pine stands or even open prairie. If you can find a good little pocket of timber, that's a good place to look.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I've seen up here too. I know, like I said before, getting out and chasing cats, we get a lot cover a lot of country. And I know in two or three different places I found places kind of like what you're saying, especially on those north slopes. I've seen
Uh-huh.
quite a bit of rut activity. And I know
Sure.
one place in particular, and I know I'm not gonna tell you where it is, at least not at least not on the podcast here. But I know we found a really nice pocket last year, and it was kind of like what you said. It came up off a fairly open bottom, and came up into a little bit thicker timber, not crazy thick, but
Yep.
definitely obviously thicker than what's on the bottom there. And then it kind of followed a finger ridge up,
Yep.
and I was absolutely amazed coming off that bottom, getting up onto that finger, and then kind of seeing how many rubs were just in that area. It was pretty amazing to see. And some of the trees, I mean, shoot, some of them were 8 or 10 inches around that they're rubbing. It's
Oh yeah.
wild.
Yeah. Yeah, they'll girdle some big trees and 6 feet up off the ground even.
Yeah, that's
So,
exactly what we were finding. So now I just gotta
yeah.
now I just gotta draw a tag. Shoot, good luck with that, right?
Yeah,
Ah,
absolutely. You and me both. At
right.
least you'll draw a tag eventually. I don't
Well,
know if I'll ever draw a tag.
well, that's why I'm kind of looking at Wyoming. They've got
Yeah.
that unit that shouldn't be too hard.
Yep.
Um, so we kind of talked about it before. You mentioned about, getting in where there's some good access and listening for bugles and such. Well, what's your opinion of getting in there and driving the roads, and then every once in a while maybe stepping out and bugling? And then if if that works, what's a good time? Are you wanting to do it like 2 o'clock in the morning, or like right at daylight, or right at dark? Kind of what's your thoughts on that?
Sure. Well, so I think in areas you got, a lot of country to cover. If you do have fairly good road access, you could probably get away with that, especially if there's little, just a small hunt pressure, like the hills. They don't give out a lot of tags in them hills, so your pressure usually isn't terribly high. Um, there's also a lot of public land, so it's not like everybody's congregating in one area. Um, Under those circumstances, yeah, absolutely. That's a great way to cover some country, um, to figure out where the elk are. Um, the best times to do it, in my mind, are early morning before the sun comes up and late evening and even in the middle of the night. I know elk, they're active all through the night, and a lot of the times the bulls are a lot more vocal at night. Especially, that hour and a half, 2 hours before dawn. Um, and then, hour, 2 hours after sunset. Those are great times, and you know, probably, especially at night, you're not going to be able to get on those bulls right away, but you can pinpoint them figure out where they're going to be so you can go after them first thing in the morning.
Sure. Awesome. Hey, man, lots of good information. I appreciate it. But now we kind of get to
Oh yeah.
the fun part. All right. So if you had to pick one, I'm not going to say caliber. If you had to pick one chambering for a rifle to hunt elk with for the rest of your life, what it would be?
Oh, put me on the spot.
Oh,
Oh
I
my
know.
goodness. Oh my goodness. I like how you had to you had to change from caliber to the chambering because I'd picked up 25. But
I know.
oh, if I had to go with one chambering to hunt elk, um, hmm, uh, you know, it's it's been tossed around so much, but I think I'd have to go with the 300 Win Mag.
300 Win
Um,
Mag. Why?
well, you kind of, it's so popular. There's so many different options available for it and good options for elk, especially. Um, it's flat shooting. The recoil it's heavy, but it's manageable. Um, and it's just in my mind, it's one of the best all around elk guns, whether I'm hunting, you know, thick timber where I'm gonna shoot something at 50 yards, or I'm hunting up here on the prairie where I might shoot one at 500-600 yards. I can load up a bonded bullet and know that elk's, I'm that bullet's gonna do what it's gonna need to do to kill that elk at any distance I'm comfortable shooting at him. Um, and it's the other thing is the ammo availability. I mean, you can go into any little hardware store or sporting goods store, you're gonna find 300 Win Mag ammo.
Sure. So
So
what grain of bullet are you shooting?
I would probably do if I was gonna go like a monolithic lead-free bullet, 165 grains, I think. Um, if I'm doing a lead bullet, like a nozzler partition or even a cup and core bullet, 180 grains is probably what I'm gonna run. Um, with a nozzler partition or a bonded bullet, I might squeak down to 165. Just I'm more of a fan of a medium weight bullet going as fast as I can, than super heavy for caliber bullets, just because I like the dramatic energy transfer. And I have shot a few elk with a 300, and actually one of them was just 165 grain cup and core bullet quartering away, and it broke the offside shoulder, and that elk didn't make it, but I don't know, 10 yards and tipped over. So
Oh, that's some pretty good penetration all
yeah,
the way through the front shoulder and then out the opposite shoulder, or did you
no,
put it behind the shoulder?
it, it went in behind right at the last rib. He was quartering away right at the last rib and broke his offside shoulder.
Dang, that's some pretty good penetration. Yeah, that's why
Yeah,
300 Win Mag's hard to put down. I mean,
it is.
there's a reason why it's been around for so long.
Yo, how about you? What would your chambering be?
Oh, man. Well, you know,
I
it's
know
not
what's coming.
it's not fair to turn the tables on me. Actually, I'm going to surprise you though. I'm going to surprise you. So,
You might.
I would love to say the 6.8 Western. I really would.
Oh,
I've absolutely fallen in love with that cartridge. It's just a phenomenal cartridge. I was actually out doing some testing with mine today. I got a hold of some 175 grain Sierras that I've been
sure.
working with and tried a little bit different powder on them. I've been kind of struggling to get the performance out of them that I wanted to, but I threw some Retumbo in there
Sure.
over a little bit of a compressed load. But I got it up well over 2,900 feet per second coming out of there.
Yeah.
And
that would be pretty good elk medicine.
oh,
If I
I
could
was
say so
super
myself.
pleased with it. Really, really pleased. I haven't done any accuracy tests yet. I was just trying to figure out how fast I could push it without making the gun blow up in my face. And I think I've just about hit it. I was almost got to 2950, and I think I'm gonna back off just a touch.
Sure.
But
Yep.
yeah, that's gonna be an amazing load if it pans out, I think, for elk. But honestly, I would have to go with the good old classic 30-06, man. Really, if
Yep.
I just had to choose one, and it's for a lot of the same reasons you said, with that 300 Win Bag, availability of ammo and the
Yep.
choices of ammo is it's just wild. It's
Oh
everywhere.
yeah.
You can't walk anywhere without finding it. And if you do just the smallest amount of due diligence and find two or three factory loads that work for you, you'll never have to worry about being out of ammo. Or
Oh,
like
absolutely.
say if you flew somewhere and the aircraft lost your ammo or whatever, you can walk into any sporting goods store and find it. So
Yep.
yeah, I'm really excited. I'd really like to, if I just had to choose one, I think that would be it. And
Yeah.
if
Yeah, and
I
you
had
can't
to,
go wrong.
no, and that's going to do everything, kind of similar to that 300 Win Mag. It's going to do everything, from probably don't have a quite as far of a max range on it. You probably would top out around that, 400, maybe 450 yard range, which,
Yep.
I mean, quarter of a mile. I have yet to take a shot at an elk
Oh
over
yeah.
400 yard,
That's
over
I
450. So,
I don't know if I'd be comfortable taking a first shot at an elk beyond that with any gun, just because I do know how tenacious they are, and the will to live can be amazing at times. And if we're starting out that far away, I don't want to try to catch up to that elk if I don't make a killing shot. So
oh, absolutely. I'm right with you there. And that's kind of the other thing I really like, at 30-06 for is it's got plenty of oomph, it's got plenty of authority, but the recoil is going to be even more mild than that 300 Win Mag, and it's going to allow
yep,
for a really fast follow-up shot, if
it
you're
will. Yep.
if you have to do that. And then and I think I'd try to stay around that, 165 to 175 grain range. In fact,
Yep.
Federal has their fusion bullet, and I want to say, oh, I can't remember if it's 165 or 175 grain, but that's an amazing bullet. I really like that
Oh
hybrid
yeah.
type of bullet where it's got that copper shank and then lead up
You're
front.
you're thinking of the terminal ascent.
The terminal ascent. Yes. Yes. Thank you for correcting me. Yep.
Yes.
I'm sorry,
Yep.
everybody. That's on me and not having good notes in front of me to reference. No, you're absolutely right. That is the
Yep.
Federal's terminal ascent bullet.
I do love that bullet. I've got some loaded in my 7mm Magnum, and the things they do are amazing.
Yeah, I am just on pins and needles waiting to see if they ever actually start producing some heavy 277 terminal ascents. I'd love to get a hold of some and try them out in my 6.8 Western. But yes, that's that's kind of what I would go with, I think, if I just had to choose one. I mean, there's so many,
Yeah,
but
there is.
it's
There
hard to
is.
give out. I don't think getting down into the 6.5s would be hard. I think a 6.5 PRC is
Hmm.
about the lightest I would go, if I'm
You
talking
know,
Western elk.
yeah, under the circumstances, if I was to set myself up and be strict about my regimen, a 6.5 Creedmoor will do it and do it just fine. But I would have to limit myself to shots at inside of 200 yards. Um, but
Yeah, and I think that's where a lot of people, they poo poo, a 6.5 Creedmoor, and I do too. It's just because it's more some of the yahoos that shoot them more than the cartridge itself. But yeah, it's
you
actually
know,
Absolutely, and amazingly phenomenal round. And I think you can trace a lot of the current technological innovations when it comes to cartridges back, kind of to that. It's almost the first, you will say.
You know,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, I think within its limitations, absolutely, I mean, people have been killing elk with 30-30s for
Oh yeah.
for how
I've
long,
I've got a friend that shot elk with a 22 250, and he's never lost one. But I wouldn't trust that either.
that's a
But
that's maybe a little
he gets
much.
he gets to watch the elk in his front yard, and he shoots one when he feels like it. So
Oh, that's just
he's a
cheap.
little more gifted than the rest of us.
That's just cheap. Yeah,
But
I can see that.
that is one thing I think, when it comes to elk hunt, a lot of people think, oh, you need the big magnums to kill elk, when you really don't. Just about any deer rifle will work just fine for elk as long as you get the right bullet and the right load for it.
When I think you hit the nail on the head right there, make sure you have the right bullet. And, my personal opinion, as you go down in caliber, uh, using something like a bonded bullet or a monometal bullet, becomes even more
Agreed.
important. Because you
Agreed.
get a lot more penetration out of that.
Yep, I would agree with you 100% on that. You can, when you're shooting the big magnums, you can err a little bit on the side of uh cost. You can get away with a cup and core bullet for elk out of a 300, as long as you're shooting 180 grain bullets. Whereas, if you're wanting to hunt elk with a 270, um, you definitely want to go higher weight, as high as you can, like 150, and try to stick with a bonded bullet or like a partition, where you've got a bullet that will retain its weight and do some penetration.
Right.
Um,
So, and I know I've told you the story, but I'm gonna kind of relay it because it's actually a really good case in point here. So the first elk I ever shot was up in Montana, and there's a lot of story in between, but I'm gonna get to the meat of it here. Basically, we had a shot at it at about 425 yards, and I was carrying a 270 Winchester, and I had 150 grain partitions loaded in it, going about 28, 2850, I think is what I had that
yep.
load set at. And I really didn't want to shoot the thing at first, but I tried to get a hold of my brother-in-law and my other brother-in-law, and they were down the hill a little bit, and this elk was going to disappear into the timber, and so it was either I shoot it or nobody shot it. So of course I shot it, and but I put that round straight through the shoulder. I mean, I couldn't have center punched that shoulder blade any better than what I did, and it was because I screwed up the lead on it. I led it a little bit further than what I needed to, and just center punched that shoulder, and watch that big old shoulder hunch up and then just drop. I mean, I knew I had a good hit on him, and didn't
Yep.
manage to get another bullet in him before he took off. But I will say that when we finally got that elk down, we tracked him for a while, and just because of the hunting pressure in that area, we pushed him a little bit harder than what I really would have liked to. I'd like to backed off for a couple 3 hours and then gone in after him, but we didn't. We waited about 30 minutes or an hour and then took off after him. And I really think we'd have found him probably not in the first bed, but we actually ended up bumping him out of a bed right in the middle of a big stack of jack pines. And I think we would have found him dead right there if we could have waited that 2 or 3 hours. But we didn't. We
Oh
bumped him
yeah,
out of that.
absolutely.
Ended up shooting him a couple more times and put him down. The best part of that whole story was when we finally got him down. We looked down the slope a little bit from us. We were about 30 yards from the trail we walked in on and about 300 yards from the pickup. So I really can't complain too much.
Yeah.
But when we pulled the front shoulder off of that elk, I was actually really, really surprised It blew probably a fist size hole in the back shoulder of that elk. It didn't penetrate into both lungs. I got one lung and, a few pieces of bone and lead into the offside lung, but not enough to really do as much damage as what I would have liked to. Um,
Sure.
but at, 425 yards, shooting at 270 with 150 grain, I thought it was pretty decent performance for all that.
Oh, yeah.
If I'd have been shooting a monometal or a bonded bullet instead of that partition, I think I probably would have got both lungs and gone through, even breaking that front shoulder.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but it just
And
does.
go ahead.
No, go. I'm just rambling at
Well,
this point.
I was gonna, you're sharing your elk stories, I'll share mine.
Yeah,
So,
go for it.
and so that elk, the elk that I just harvested down in Arizona at the beginning of the year, since I had moved down there, I didn't take a lot of guns with me because, I didn't want that hassle to deal with. So the gun I actually took to elk hunt with, on the off chance that I was going to get a tag, which I did not figure, was actually my 257 Ackley improved, which by most people with any sense is too small for elk. But I like to push my limits a little bit.
That's exactly why you took it.
Yep, exactly. It's 25, and I am a fan of 25s. But anyways, I had that thing loaded up with 120 grain nozzler partitions, doing 3,100 out of the muzzle on that thing. So they were packing some heat. But the elk I shot, she was facing me dead on at right at 200 yards, and I shot her and I hit her right in the point of the front shoulder, and that bullet went through the shoulder, through the top of the heart, through both lungs, and ended up breaking the last rib in her rib cage.
Oh wow!
And she only made it 30 yards. She made it just out of sight before she balled up there in the bottom. and then I called a buddy. He come help me pack mine out. And as we were going in to pack mine out, another cow stepped out, and he didn't bring his gun, so he borrowed mine, and he shot her quartering away at just under 100 yards. And same thing. That bullet went the opposite way. It went in the last rib, broke her offside shoulder on the backside, and went all the way out. And she folded right on the spot. So,
I think that just highlights what we were talking about before, knowing your capabilities. I mean, 200 yards, 100 yards, that's not too terrible far of a shot.
No, it's not.
Good
but
shot placement too, not hitting the bones and not hitting a lot of structure.
Well, that's the thing though. The one I shot faced me, I did hit her. I hit her right on the point of that front shoulder and shattered it.
Nice. Gotcha.
And that's what's impressive to me, is that bullet still made it all the way through, or as close to all the way through as you can. But
yeah,
like I said, I was using a gun that by most standards is too small for elk. And, I do have plenty of other guns that would be much better elk guns, but it worked just fine for what I was doing. And granted, they were cows, they weren't bulls. They were only, 500 pounds at most. Whereas your bull was probably closer to 7. So that also plays a factor in it.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot more dense muscle and harder bones and such, looking at the bull versus a cow.
Yes, but I have seen cows soak up a lot of lead too. We shot one in Wyoming one time that we ended up shooting. I shot twice with my 308, and my brother shot twice with a 7 mag before she went down.
Well,
And then,
last year, my brother-in-law, he got lucky enough to get a Hills tag here, and the cow he ended up shooting, he shot her 3 times with a 300 Win mag with 100 and what was he using? 180 grain ballistic silver tips, I think is what he was shooting. And 3 rounds, you could have covered each of those, you could have covered that whole group with the palm of your hand. And she finally just tipped over and she just ate them. It was almost like she didn't even register she was getting shot.
Yo.
Yeah, I hear you. They can soak up a lot of punishment sometimes.
They're sometimes they're as easy to kill as a white-tailed doe, and sometimes as hard to kill as, goodness gracious, a bull elephant, it seems like.
Yeah, seems like. Well, hey man, I really appreciate you coming on today and talking with us about kind of your viewpoints as a biologist about where to find out kind of some tips and stuff on getting started on a new area and a new hunt. And appreciate the information you shared with us today, man.
Absolutely, anytime. I'm glad I could get on here and help you guys out.
Oh, you be careful. Anytime is be careful what you promised there.
Well, that's I don't mind doing it. I like helping people get out and be successful. So,
well, good.
Just so long as they don't encroach on my honey holes, that's okay.
Well, we won't talk about that. Secrets, right? Secrets and what they call it in the Army, OPSEC, right?
Yep. A magician never tells his secrets.
There you go. All right, man. Well, thank you again. I appreciate it. Hope everyone out there is listening. They got some good information on here, and even if you didn't, hopefully maybe you found it amusing. So, thanks once again, Kale, and for all of you listening, shoot straight, aim small, miss small, and good luck out there. This is Long Walker Outdoors signing off.